My name is Victoria, I'm 27 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. I've always believed in hard work, creativity, and integrity, three things I thought everyone in my industry respected. But I learned the hard way that not everyone plays fair. It all started a few months ago at a tech conference. I had been working for weeks on this idea, a concept for an app that could streamline communication between freelancers and small businesses. I stayed up countless nights sketching designs, coding small prototypes, and even preparing a pitch for the conference's innovation showcase. The winner would get not only recognition but also potential investors circling around. The night before the showcase, I made the mistake of talking too openly to someone I thought I could trust, a colleague named Rachel. We had met at a few networking events, and she always seemed friendly enough, the kind of woman who gave you a warm smile but with eyes that seemed to linger just a little too long, calculating. I brushed off the feeling, thinking I was just paranoid. That next morning, I sat in the audience, nervous but excited, waiting for my turn. When Rachel's name was called, I clapped politely, not expecting much. But the second she opened her mouth, my heart dropped into my stomach. She was presenting my idea. My concept, my research, even the little catchphrases I'd written in my notes, word for word. The crowd loved her. Applause filled the hall, people leaned in with admiration, and the judges looked impressed. Meanwhile, I sat frozen, my palms damp, nails digging into my legs under the table. I wanted to stand up, shout, expose her. But I didn't. Not then. Instead, I bit my tongue and clapped with everyone else, forcing a smile that burned more than any insult. Because deep down, I knew one thing: this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. And I was going to make Rachel regret ever crossing me. A few days later, Rachel's big project officially launched. She had secured a small grant from one of the judges at the showcase and was already bragging about the investors lining up to talk to her. On social media, she plastered posts about her brilliant innovation and posed for pictures with her new partners. Everyone was congratulating her, tagging her name, praising her as if she was some kind of prodigy. I kept quiet. I didn't argue, didn't post a single thing. I simply watched. Because I knew what was coming. Rachel had stolen my idea, but she hadn't stolen my knowledge. She didn't understand the mechanics behind it, the flaws, the limitations, and the workarounds that I had spent months perfecting. She had taken the pretty surface, but none of the substance underneath. And sure enough, within a week, cracks began to show. Users started complaining online about bugs in the app. Businesses that had signed up to test it were posting about how nothing synced properly, and freelancers were frustrated because they couldn't even get their profiles to load. Rachel tried to cover it up at first, posting polished updates and carefully worded, "We're working on improvements," statements. But word travels fast in the tech world, and soon, the whispers began. She rushed it. She doesn't know what she's doing. This is embarrassing. I'll admit, watching her scramble was satisfying. It was like seeing someone wear a stolen dress. It might fit at first glance, but the second they try to move in it, everything falls apart. But here's the thing. I wasn't satisfied with just watching her fail. No. That was too easy. Her humiliation was just the first step in my plan. What came next? That was where the real revenge began. After Rachel's launch collapsed, I knew she was vulnerable. Investors who had once cheered her on were backing away quietly, and the online criticism was brutal. Still, she was stubborn. Instead of admitting defeat, she doubled down, promising a new version of the app soon. That was my chance. I spent nights at my desk, coffee cups scattered around, refining the original concept the way I had always intended it to work. I fixed the bugs, polished the user interface, and added features I hadn't shared with anyone. My version wasn't just functional, it was elegant, something people could actually use without tearing their hair out. But here's where the plan got interesting. I didn't just want to release my project. I wanted to make sure everyone knew Rachel had stolen from me. And to do that, I needed receipts. Luckily, I had them. I still had the notes I'd shared with Rachel before the showcase. Screenshots of our text messages where I'd explained key parts of the design, sketches I had emailed her asking for feedback, and even a voice memo she had left me, thanking me for helping her brainstorm. She probably didn't even remember sending it, but I had saved it. Now, it was all evidence. I carefully started building a quiet buzz online. Not loud accusations, not yet, just little hints. I dropped a blog post on Medium under my name, outlining the real research behind the concept, the technical hurdles, and how I solved them. I posted mock-ups and demo clips on my LinkedIn, framing it as though I had been working on this for months, which, of course, I had. People noticed. Comments rolled in. DMs from other developers popped up, impressed with my work. And then, the first message came in that told me I was on the right track. "Victoria, isn't this the same project Rachel claimed was hers?" I smiled at my screen. The cracks in her stolen empire were about to widen. It didn't take long for the comparisons to start flooding in. Every post I made about my project gained traction. People shared it, debated it, and pointed out the obvious. It looked like a cleaner, better version of what Rachel had launched. At first, Rachel ignored it. She pretended she wasn't bothered, posting filtered photos of herself hard at work, with captions like, "Haters don't stop visionaries." I could almost hear her smug tone through the screen. But then, the comments under her posts started to shift. "Isn't this Victoria's idea? Why does your version look half-baked compared to hers? Victoria's already solved the problems yours still has." The silence from Rachel's side was telling. She didn't engage. She didn't argue. She just tried to push ahead, promising updates, but it was clear, people weren't buying it anymore. Then came the day she finally reached out to me directly. My phone buzzed late at night, and when I checked, there it was, a message from her. "Rachel, can we talk?" I let it sit for hours before replying with a simple, "About what?" She called me immediately after. I didn't pick up. I wanted her to stew in it. Finally, I sent a text, "If you have something to say, say it here." Her reply was short, but it told me everything I needed to know. "Rachel, you're ruining me." I almost laughed out loud. Ruining her? She had stolen my work, stood on stage in front of hundreds, and soaked in the applause that should have been mine. All I had done was reclaim what was already mine. But I wasn't finished yet. Because if she thought I was going to stop at exposing her, she had no idea what I had planned next. The next phase of my plan wasn't just about proving Rachel was a fraud, it was about making sure she could never pull this kind of stunt again. I wasn't interested in a temporary humiliation. I wanted something permanent. I knew her type, image-obsessed, desperate for validation, addicted to applause. Take that away, and she'd crumble. So I started digging. Not in a malicious, illegal way, I didn't need to. Rachel had left plenty of loose threads in the open. Old interviews where she exaggerated her achievements. Blog posts where she had borrowed entire paragraphs from other writers without credit. Comments from past colleagues hinting at her unreliability. Piece by piece, I built a timeline of her so-called career, and the gaps in it. Meanwhile, I kept pushing my project forward. I launched a small beta test with a select group of freelancers and businesses I trusted. Their feedback was incredible, and soon enough, word spread. I didn't even need to market aggressively, people came to me. Investors who had once flocked to Rachel started slipping into my inbox, curious about what I was building. And that's when I made my move. I published a detailed article on my website titled, "The Real Story Behind the Project." It wasn't emotional, not even accusatory. It was factual, backed with screenshots, dates, and proof of my work. I laid out how I had been developing the idea long before the showcase, how I had shared details with Rachel, and how my version fixed the issues hers couldn't. It was calm. Professional. But devastating. Within hours, the article spread across LinkedIn, Twitter, and even industry newsletters. The comments were brutal. People weren't just questioning Rachel anymore, they were calling her out, demanding answers. And the best part? I hadn't even directly mentioned her name once. Rachel couldn't stay quiet forever. My article had spread too far, too fast. People were tagging her, asking for her side of the story, and the silence was making her look guilty. Eventually, she cracked. She went live on Instagram one evening, sitting in her perfectly staged home office with the fake girl boss decor in the background. I watched, popcorn in hand, as she tried to keep her voice calm. "I just want to clear the air," she began, with that practiced smile of hers. "There's been a lot of misinformation going around, and I feel like people don't understand the full story." She launched into a speech about collaboration and inspiration, claiming that my work had merely influenced hers. She said she had every right to build her own version, and that people were twisting the narrative to make her look bad. The problem was, she had underestimated just how sharp people could be when they smelled dishonesty. The comments on her live weren't kind. "Influenced? You copied her. Where's your proof you worked on this before her? Why does her version actually work and yours doesn't?" I could see her composure cracking as she read the flood of messages. Her smile grew tighter, her voice more defensive. By the time she ended the live stream, she looked less like a confident innovator and more like a cornered liar. And then, to make matters worse for her, a few people from her past started chiming in online. Former co-workers, classmates, even someone from a previous startup she'd worked at, all sharing stories of Rachel taking credit for work that wasn't hers. The internet didn't forget, and now it had receipts. I didn't even have to lift a finger. She was destroying herself, publicly, piece by piece. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because her reputation wasn't the only thing I planned on taking. While Rachel scrambled to defend herself online, I was busy doing the opposite, building. The beta testers I'd invited into my project were spreading the word without me even asking. Small business owners were tweeting about how much easier it made their operations. Freelancers were recommending it in their groups and forums. It was the kind of organic growth that no marketing budget could buy, and it was happening right in front of Rachel's imploding career. That's when the emails started pouring in. Investors. Recruiters. Conference organizers. The same people who had once tripped over themselves to get Rachel's attention were now reaching out to me. One email stood out in particular, an invitation to present my project at a high-profile industry summit in San Francisco. The very same summit Rachel had been bragging about for months, the one she claimed she was sure to headline. I smiled as I read it, because I already knew she wasn't going to be on that stage anymore. In the days leading up to the summit, I kept my preparations quiet. I didn't post about it, didn't brag, didn't make any announcements. I wanted it to hit her like a thunderclap when it happened. Sure enough, 2 days before the event, Rachel posted a bitter story on Instagram. "Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, I won't be speaking at the summit this year. Excited to focus on other opportunities though." Translation: she'd been dropped. And 2 days later, I stood on that stage, under those bright lights, presenting my project to a packed room. Applause thundered through the hall, and this time, it was mine. All mine. I spotted a few familiar faces in the audience, people who had cheered for Rachel just weeks ago, now leaning forward with their full attention on me. Rachel had stolen my moment once. I had just stolen hers back. But there was still one final step left in my plan, the one that would make sure she never forgot me. The summit was more than just a victory lap. It was the perfect stage to set up the final act of my plan. I didn't just want to rise above Rachel, I wanted to make sure she could never sink her claws into someone else's work again. After my presentation, I was swarmed with questions, handshakes, and invitations to private networking dinners. The kind of attention Rachel had once thrived on was now mine. I could have stopped there, basked in it, and moved on with my life. But every time I thought about how she had walked up on that stage weeks ago and accepted applause that was meant for me, I felt the same fire in my chest. So I played my last card. During one of the Q&A panels later in the summit, someone asked me how I had developed the project so quickly compared to other startups. It was the perfect setup. I took a breath, smiled, and said calmly, I'd been working on this concept for months, long before the showcase where some of you might have first heard about it. Unfortunately, my work was misrepresented at that event by someone else, which delayed me from releasing it earlier. But I believe the best ideas speak for themselves, and I'm grateful to finally show you the real version. The room went silent for a moment before whispers spread like wildfire. I hadn't named Rachel, but I didn't need to. Everyone knew. By the time I stepped off that stage, the industry chatter had shifted completely. People weren't just talking about my app anymore, they were talking about Rachel. And not in the way she wanted. That night, my inbox lit up again, but one email stood out. A well-known tech blog wanted to feature my story, the real story, and they promised to publish it with the evidence I had kept tucked away all this time. Rachel wasn't just losing her credibility. She was about to lose her entire career. The article dropped on a Monday morning. Perfect timing, people were scrolling at work, looking for something juicy to talk about, and this was exactly the kind of story that spread like wildfire. The headline was sharp, but professional, from betrayal to breakthrough, how one developer reclaimed her stolen idea. It told everything, how I had started developing the concept months before the showcase, how I had shared details with Rachel in confidence, and how she had presented it as her own. The blog embedded screenshots of my notes, timestamps from emails, and even the voice memo Rachel had sent thanking me for helping her brainstorm. It wasn't just my word against hers anymore. It was proof. Within hours, the piece was everywhere. Tech forums lit up. LinkedIn discussions exploded. Twitter was a battlefield of people tagging Rachel and demanding answers. Some defended her at first, calling it a misunderstanding, but then others chimed in, former classmates, co-workers, and even people she'd partnered with in the past. Story after story surfaced of Rachel cutting corners, taking credit, or exaggerating her role in group projects. The pattern was undeniable. Rachel tried to fight back, of course. She posted a shaky video about cancel culture and how she was being unfairly targeted. But by then, it was too late. Every word she spoke just made her look guiltier. Meanwhile, my app's downloads skyrocketed. Investors who had once hesitated were now eager to back me, and the article had painted me not just as a developer, but as a fighter. Someone who had been wronged and still came out stronger. Rachel had wanted fame, recognition, applause. She got it, just not the kind she wanted. And for me? This was only the beginning of everything she had tried to steal. By the end of that week, Rachel's downfall was complete. Her name had become synonymous with dishonesty in the tech community. Every time she tried to post something new, the comments section lit up with people reminding her of what she had done. Idea Thief became her unofficial nickname online, and it followed her everywhere. One by one, her connections started cutting ties. The investors she once bragged about ghosted her. The companies that had partnered with her quietly removed her name from their websites. Even her so-called friends stopped liking her posts. The silence was louder than any insult. The breaking point came when one of the industry's biggest conferences announced their updated speaker lineup. Rachel's name had been on it for months. Now, it was gone. In its place? Mine. I didn't have to gloat. I didn't have to say a word. The industry had already decided whose side it was on. Meanwhile, my app was thriving. Downloads had doubled in a matter of days, and I was fielding calls from venture capitalists who wanted to invest. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not just chasing opportunities, but owning them. I thought about Rachel often during those weeks. I wondered if she sat at home refreshing her phone, watching my name trend while hers sank into the mud. I wondered if she regretted underestimating me, or if she still convinced herself she had done nothing wrong. Either way, it didn't matter. Her downfall was no longer my concern. Because the revenge wasn't just about taking her down. It was about rising higher than she ever imagined I could. And now, I finally was. I should have known Rachel wouldn't disappear quietly. A few weeks after the article went viral, just as I was settling into my new momentum, she tried to claw her way back into relevance. One morning, I woke up to see her name trending again. She had given an exclusive interview to a small online magazine, painting herself as the victim of my smear campaign. According to her, I had twisted the truth and exaggerated details to make her look bad. She even claimed I had purposely sabotaged her launch by withholding crucial technical information. Reading it made my stomach turn, not because her words hurt, but because of how blatantly desperate she sounded. But here's the thing about lies: they fall apart when people have receipts. And I had plenty. The magazine hadn't even bothered to fact-check her story. Within hours of the article being posted, readers were tearing it apart in the comments. People shared screenshots from my original evidence, pointing out every inconsistency in her claims. Some even dug up clips from her failed live stream, reminding everyone how defensive and guilty she had looked back then. By the end of the day, the magazine issued a half-hearted correction and quietly buried the piece on their site. Rachel's comeback had lasted less than 24 hours. Meanwhile, my inbox was busier than ever. A major publication reached out, asking me to write an op-ed about ethics in innovation. Investors scheduled meetings. A recruiter from one of the biggest tech firms in the country asked if I'd consider a leadership role. Rachel's desperate move had only backfired. She had tried to smear me, but all she had done was shine the spotlight brighter on my success. And for the first time, I realized something important: revenge wasn't just about making her regret what she did. It was about making sure I thrived in spite of it. And that part? I was just getting started. By the time winter rolled around, the tables had fully turned. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. The few times her name popped up, it was usually in the form of a snide comment under someone else's post. "Don't pull a Rachel" had actually become a running joke in my industry. If someone rushed a project, copied too much from competitors, or overhyped themselves without substance, people compared them to her. She had gone from the next big thing to a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, I was busier than I'd ever been. My app had officially launched nationwide, and the response was overwhelming. I had a growing team, funding lined up, and partnerships with companies I used to only dream of working with. Some days I barely had time to breathe, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like I was finally living the life I had been working toward for years. What struck me most was how quickly people forgot Rachel. In an industry obsessed with the next shiny thing, she wasn't even worth talking about anymore. But me? My name was everywhere. I was invited to panels, podcasts, and interviews. People wanted to hear my story, not just about the app, but about how I had bounced back after someone tried to steal everything from me. And honestly, I told it. I wasn't shy about what had happened, but I also didn't dwell on it. I framed it as resilience, as turning betrayal into motivation. People respected that. Investors ate it up. And deep down, I knew every time someone read my story, Rachel had to live with the fact that I was remembered as the creator, and she was remembered as the thief. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was legacy. And mine was just beginning. Sometimes at night, when the chaos of the day finally quieted down and I was left alone with my thoughts, I found myself replaying everything that had happened. The conference. Rachel on that stage. The applause that should have been mine. The sleepless nights afterward, wondering if I'd ever get my chance to prove myself. And then I thought about now, my name in headlines, my company growing, my project thriving. It felt surreal, like I had stepped into the life I used to only imagine. But I'd be lying if I said revenge wasn't part of what drove me. At the beginning, every late-night coding, every article I wrote, every calculated move I made, it all came from a place of anger. I wanted Rachel to feel what I had felt: the humiliation, the helplessness, the burn of watching someone else steal your work and take the credit. And she did. God, did she ever. She had crumbled under the weight of her lies, and I had risen higher than she could have ever dreamed. On the surface, I had won. But the deeper truth was this: revenge wasn't just about Rachel anymore. Somewhere along the way, it had turned into something bigger. It became about proving to myself that I was capable of more than just surviving betrayal. I could turn it into fuel. I could turn it into success. Rachel had been the spark, but I was the fire. And as much as I hated what she had done, a small part of me was grateful. Because without her betrayal, maybe I wouldn't have pushed this hard. Maybe I wouldn't have found the strength to fight for what was mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel had stolen my idea to build her future, and in doing so, she ended up building mine. Not long ago, I ran into Rachel in the most unexpected place, a small coffee shop near downtown. I had stopped in after a long meeting, exhausted but happy, and there she was, sitting alone at a corner table with a half-empty cup in front of her. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. The perfectly styled hair, the confident smile, the designer clothes she used to flaunt, gone. She wore a simple hoodie, her eyes glued to her phone, scrolling endlessly like she was looking for something that wasn't there. She noticed me before I could decide whether to say anything. Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something, recognition, bitterness, and maybe even shame. She gave me the faintest nod, almost like an acknowledgement, then quickly looked away. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. That moment was enough. She knew. I knew. And the silence between us said more than any confrontation ever could. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in months. Because that was the final piece of my revenge, not humiliating her again, not rubbing my success in her face, but seeing her defeated by her own choices. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. Life had already done the work for me. Back at my office, I sat down with my team, reviewing our next big launch. The room buzzed with energy, ideas bouncing around, laughter filling the air. This was where I belonged, surrounded by people who believed in me, building something real, something lasting. Rachel was in the past. My future was right here. And for the first time, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about victory. Looking back now, it almost feels like someone else's story. The girl who sat in that audience, frozen as Rachel paraded my idea on stage, feels like a different version of me, smaller, unsure, afraid of being overlooked. That night, I thought I had lost everything. But in reality, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Today, my company isn't just surviving, it's thriving. The app has expanded beyond what I first imagined, with new features and partnerships that keep us growing month after month. I have a team I trust, people who share the same vision and values I hold dear. Together, we've created something that's making a real impact, helping freelancers find work, helping businesses connect, making lives easier. And me? I've found my voice. I'm no longer the woman who bites her tongue and forces a smile while someone else steals her moment. I speak up. I take credit for my work without hesitation. I've even started mentoring younger women in tech, because I know exactly how it feels to have someone try to silence or overshadow you. I want them to know they don't have to wait for permission to shine. As for Rachel, she's a footnote. Occasionally her name drifts across my feed, usually attached to another failed attempt at a comeback, but it doesn't stir anything in me anymore. She took her shot at stealing my future, and instead she handed it to me. Revenge was sweet, I won't lie. Watching her empire collapse was satisfying. But the real victory? It wasn't her downfall, it was my rise. And as I stand here now, building a life and career I'm proud of, I can finally say with absolute certainty. She stole my idea. But I took back my destiny.